Welcome to Empire Hub, the place where history comes alive, where the echoes of the past speak of vision, ambition, and transformation. And today, we journey into the extraordinary life of a man who reshaped an entire nation's destiny, Peter the Great of Russia. Born on June 9th, 1672 in Moscow, Peter Alexeyevich Romanov entered a world of political intrigue and dynastic tension. The son of Tsar Alexis and his second wife, Natalia Naryshkina, Peter's childhood was marked by instability, for after his father's death in 1676, the Russian throne passed first to his half-brother Fyodor III, and when Fyodor died childless, a bitter struggle erupted between the Naryshkin and Miloslavsky families. The compromise that emerged in 1682 placed Peter, only 10 years old, as co-Tsar with his half-brother Ivan V, under the regency of their half-sister Sophia Alexeyevna. While Sophia ruled in name and power, Peter spent much of his youth away from the Kremlin, living in the countryside village of Preobrazhenskoye. It was here that his curiosity and creativity blossomed. Surrounded by foreign craftsmen, engineers, and soldiers in the so-called German quarter of Moscow, Peter learned the basics of shipbuilding, gunnery, fortification, and navigation, skills uncommon for a Russian noble of the time. He organized elaborate mock battles with his toy army, a group of friends and young noblemen who would eventually form the elite Preobrazhensky and Semyonovsky Guards regiments, the backbone of his future military reforms. In 1689, at the age of 17, Peter staged a coup to end Sophia's regency, forcing her into a convent and taking control of government, although his brother Ivan remained co-Tsar until his death in 1696. That same year, Peter launched his first military campaign against the Ottoman Empire, targeting the fortress of Azov on the Don River. His first attempt in 1695 failed due to a lack of naval power, but the following year he built a fleet on the Don and successfully captured Azov, giving Russia a strategic foothold on the Black Sea. Yet Peter's ambitions were far greater. He envisioned Russia as a modern European power, but knew that his country lagged far behind in technology, industry, and governance. To bridge this gap, he embarked on the Grand Embassy in 1697, a diplomatic mission that took him across Western Europe, the Netherlands, England, Prussia, and Austria. Traveling incognito as Sergeant Pyotr Mikhailov, Peter worked in Dutch shipyards learning shipbuilding from the masters, studied navigation and artillery in England, observed city planning in Vienna, and met with scientists, engineers, and monarchs to gather knowledge for his grand modernization project. This journey was cut short in 1698 by news of a revolt by the elite Streltsy musketeers back home, which Peter crushed brutally upon his return, executing hundreds and disbanding the corps, a grim sign of his readiness to use force in the name of reform. Peter's reforms began swiftly and touched every corner of Russian life. In the military, he introduced a standing army trained in Western tactics, equipped with modern weapons, and organized by merit rather than hereditary privilege. He created Russia's first navy, building ships at new dockyards in Voronezh and later at the Baltic coast, determined to make Russia a maritime power. The ultimate test of these reforms came in 1700 when Peter declared war on Sweden in what became the Great Northern War, aiming to gain access to the Baltic Sea. His early overconfidence led to a disastrous defeat at Narva, where Swedish King Charles XII routed the Russian forces despite being outnumbered. Instead of despairing, Peter used this humiliation as a lesson. He overhauled his army, improved training, recruited foreign officers, and expanded arms production. Over the next decade, Russia gradually gained the upper hand, culminating in the decisive Battle of Poltava in 1709, where Peter's forces crushed the Swedes and forced Charles into exile in the Ottoman Empire. The war dragged on until 1721, with Peter systematically capturing Swedish-held territories along the Baltic. The Treaty of Nystad that year gave Russia Estonia, Livonia, Ingria, and parts of Finland, securing the window to Europe that Peter had long sought. And in recognition of this victory, the Russian Senate granted him the titles Peter the Great, Father of the Fatherland, and Emperor of all Russia. During the war, Peter undertook one of his most ambitious projects, the construction of a new capital city, St. Petersburg, founded in 1703 on the marshy delta of the Neva River. Built in European style with wide streets, stone buildings, and canals, St. Petersburg symbolized Peter's vision of a modern Russia and became the empire's window to the West. The project was monumental and brutal. Tens of thousands of serfs and prisoners were conscripted to drain swamps, lay foundations, and erect palaces with thousands. Imagine Moscow in the summer of 1682. The Kremlin's towers rise above the city, their golden domes gleaming under the sun. Inside its fortified walls, a 10-year-old boy named Peter sleeps, blissfully unaware of the storm about to crash into his life. It begins with shouting. Heavy boots thunder through the halls. The Streltsy, elite musketeer regiments loyal to old factions, have revolted. Their rage is directed at his family. Within minutes, the palace courtyard becomes a scene of horror. Loyal advisors are dragged down the stone steps, stabbed, and thrown aside like broken dolls. Peter's mother clutches him tight, but the boy sees everything. He sees the hate in the soldiers' eyes. He sees blood pooling on the stones. He feels helpless, but not for long. That night would burn itself into his soul. Years later, when he commands the throne, he will remember the screams. And he will make the Streltsy pay. In the aftermath, Peter and his mother are moved to the quieter village of Preobrazhenskoye, far from the Kremlin's politics. For most boys, this would mean exile from power. For Peter, it becomes an opportunity. Nearby lies the German Quarter, a neighborhood of foreigners, Dutch shipbuilders, Scottish soldiers, German craftsmen. Here, Peter is exposed to a different world, to European clothing, strange foods, new weapons, and tales of distant seas. He learns about ships, cannons, and engineering, all while organizing elaborate war games with local boys. These are no ordinary games. Peter drills his toy regiments with military discipline, appoints officers and stages mock battles, complete with gunpowder and wooden forts. Without realizing it, he is training to command real armies. By the time he is 17, Peter is ready to act. In 1689, his half-sister Sophia, who has ruled as regent, is removed from power. She is locked in a convent, and Peter finally steps into the role of ruler. But he quickly realizes that while Russia is vast, it is decades, even centuries, behind the great powers of Europe. Its army is outdated, its trade is limited, and, most shockingly for Peter, it has no navy. In a world where control of the seas determines the fate of nations, this is unacceptable. His first test comes in the 1695, when Russia launches a campaign against the Ottoman fortress of Azov. Without a fleet, the siege fails. Peter's response is swift. He orders the construction of a navy on the Don River. Shipbuilders are brought from abroad, forests are cut down for timber, and by the following year, a flotilla of warships sails against Azov. This time, the fortress falls. For the first time in centuries, Russia gains access to the southern seas. But Peter's ambitions stretch far beyond one victory. In 1697, he embarks on the Grand Embassy, a diplomatic mission across Europe. Disguised as Sergeant Pyotr Mikhailov, he works on Dutch shipyards, studies naval science in England, inspects fortifications in Prussia, and meets with European rulers. He learns not just about ships and weapons, but about administration, commerce, and science. He envisions a Russia that is strong, modern, and respected. Midway through his journey, a crisis strikes, the Streltsy revolt again. Peter rushes back to Moscow, and this time, there is no mercy. Thousands are arrested, hundreds executed, many tortured in public. Their corpses are left hanging as a warning. The message is clear: the old guard will not stand in the way of the new Russia. The next years are a whirlwind of reform. Peter reorganizes the army on European lines, creates a permanent standing force, and introduces new weapons. He establishes Russia's first navy, complete with warships armed with heavy guns. The ancient, Boyar Duma is replaced with the governing Senate, a modern administrative body loyal to him. Taxes are restructured, industries encouraged, and trade routes expanded. Then comes the greatest challenge of his reign, the Great Northern War against Sweden. In 1700, at the Battle of Narva, Peter's army suffers a humiliating defeat against the brilliant Swedish king, Charles XII. Many rulers might have sued for peace. Peter does the opposite. He rebuilds his army, improves training, and strengthens fortifications. Over the next decade, Russia grinds down Sweden's forces. The decisive moment comes in 1709 at the Battle of Poltava, where Charles's army is crushed. Sweden's days as a great power are over. Russia's as a dominant force in Europe have begun. The war drags on until 1721, ending with the Treaty of Nystad. Russia gains vast territories along the Baltic Sea, securing its status as a maritime power. To mark this transformation, Peter adopts a new title, Emperor of all Russia. But Peter's vision is not limited to military conquest. In 1703, he begins building a new capital, St. Petersburg, on the marshy banks of the Neva River. Thousands of laborers, soldiers, and prisoners work in brutal conditions, battling floods, disease, and